Okay, Bailey said, all things stand revealed to the man who truly meditates. I could do a whole talk on meditation, as I have done itself, but the key thing with meditation is you can't do it wrong. Okay, as long as you are going inward, however you go inward, whatever you connect, whether you use a mantra or a candle or a picture or whatever it is that helps you that takes you into that deep place, it's the stepping back and just resting and watching and allowing. That is meditation. So whether you do that gardening, whether you do that walking, whether you get to sit regularly in a meditative practice, it's all resting and meditating with your soul. Okay. Bailey talks about in the West we need to get out of our head. We've got these educated intellects, and by becoming the mystic that we once were. She talks about there's a knowledge of God and there's a love of God. So if you like the Eastern yogic tradition, the mystical traditions, where there's a deep devotion and love to God, they don't want to know all this stuff, they just want to connect with God. And then you've got a Western more in your head, well, I need to understand all this and then I'll connect with God. Bring the two together. And that's where we are now. We're in to bring head and heart together, and we take that forward into a paradigm and a powerfulness that we would have never known before, and a way of living that we can only just visualize now. And that is what Aquarius, that is what this year is a gateway to. That's right, Aquarius. That Aquarius is the water bearer who pours forth the waters for the thirsty. So Aquarius is about how you serve the world, how you pour forth in your unique way. So as your soul contact, as you develop your intuition, you will pour forth in the way that you are meant to pour forth. And as I talk about in a bit, when I talk a bit about Bhagavad Gita, in service God is known. Whenever you give true service without thought for your own needs, wants, you know God in that moment. That is the living a spiritual life through service. Okay, I'll talk a bit more about that. So Blavatsky said, be always the silent watcher. So not just in meditation, as we open that bridge, as the intuition starts to flow, as we live in the present moment, we are mindful. The intuition's just there all the time. We just tune into it. We clear away a lot of the clutter. And I'm not saying life will be less challenging, it will be just as challenging, but you will be better equipped to see the truth of the situation, to see the challenge for what it is and the growth opportunity, to come back to forgiveness, to find gratitude and joy, to go back to those places, to find them again, to return to love more easily. This is what I talked about before, as you start to realise you have one foot in two worlds. So you're a spiritual soul and you're a person down here on the world. And through the transition of bringing those two together, it can be a tough time. That can be when you get the most challenges in your incarnations. And I know Ted talks about this. That can be when your soul really ups the challenges, because it's wanting to bring that soul to infuse those two triangles and bring them together. And there's a lot of testing and challenges go on for that to happen. And once you do, a man, this is in Treatise on White Magic, he regards himself no longer as a man controlled by his emotions, impelled by energy and directed by mind, but knows himself to be the self, or the soul, thinking through the mind, feeling through the emotions, and acting consciously. You think about the difference of that. I can think with my mind, through my mind, not my mind thinking me. I can feel with my emotions. It's not my emotions controlling me. I become aware and conscious always. And this is to know God in every waking moment. This is to be enlightened, to be realized, to realise unity. This paragraph, I think, is, you could read it, and it has so many levels of understanding. So just read it in the silence, read it again to yourself in the silence of your own inner tuition. Does it resonate with truth for you? Yeah. Does for me.
Like a trust in God, what He's saying.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right, I've talked a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita. Are you all familiar with the Gita? So, ancient, well, it's not even, it's before Hindu really. I mean, Hindus follow the teachings in the Gita. It goes back to Vedic, back to Vedic times. It's one of the oldest. It's a story. And it's a story about Arjuna, who's, like I said before, he's asked to go out into this battle. And it's a dialogue between him and Krishna, who is his soul or his highest self. And Arjuna is like the personality who's starting to wake up to the idea that he has a soul. And once he does, he's got this wonderful charioteer sitting right there to answer all his questions for him. And this is why it is such a profound text, because all the answers to those questions are just as relevant now as they were thousands of years ago. They haven't changed. The context has changed. So you can read much, and even if you read the Gita and you don't fully understand some of the language, the vibration it has speaks to your heart, even if you don't know what the words mean on a mind level.
I've seen the book, but I picked it up and flipped through and thought, it looks quite hard to understand. Flip back.
It's like, sometimes when you read poetry, you're not actually analysing in your mind what the words mean, you're just feeling in the heart what they feel like. Does that sound strange? It has a vibrational energy. You don't have to understand it with your mind at all. Your higher self, your higher self understands it completely. So Krishna is like your soul or your higher self. He's the Buddha, pure reason, intuition. This is where actions are without attachment to the outcome. There's just a complete trust that this is God's will and it must be for the highest. Going out into battle and slaying all my fellow men must be for the highest good of all. How can that be, your mind is saying? Trust. It's your duty. And this Annie Besant, who I have a copy of where she has translated Bhagavad Gita, and it's a lovely copy. She was also another woman who was very instrumental in developing the Theosophical Society 100 years ago. And she says the eternal, the all-permeating is ever present in sacrifice. So when you sacrifice your personality self who doesn't want to go out into that battle and do those things, when you open up and give way and say, yes, okay, to your intuition, to your soul, you come to know God. Therefore, without attachment, constantly perform action which is duty. For by performing action without attachment, man verily reaches the supreme. And this is where service is such a powerful path. And you will find your own unique expression of service. I'm going to talk a little bit about A Course in Miracles. I've got some handouts on all of this stuff, so you'll go away with. If anyone's not heard, who's heard of A Course in Miracles? Heard of it? Okay. It is it's the teachings of the man Jesus, who was full of Christ consciousness. So if we recognise, doesn't matter what your belief system is, but the way I see it is, there's been people who've come down as avatars, if you like, at various times in history to help steer man a bit better on his evolutionary path. And you could say that the Buddha first taught us that we could be light, we could be enlightened. And then Christ came along, and the Buddha very much worked through the mind. Okay, there was a pathway to knowing God through enlightenment through the mind. then Christ, or Jesus of Nazareth, who was full of the Christ consciousness, full of the Holy Spirit, came down and said, this is how you live from the heart. And his teachings have been changed and twisted and interpreted in all different ways. These two beings, higher beings or manifestations of God or whatever, work together. There is no, well, I'm a Buddhist and I'm a Christian, we can't talk to each other in higher realms. They very much come from the same place. A Course in Miracles was an attempt, in my understanding, to bring down some of the true meanings that we missed the first time in the Bible. So it's, for many people, it's a livable Christianity where all the sort of unsurety and all the twists and turns of the Bible are ironed out, if you like. And it's a very profound, it's very difficult. You could study it for the whole of your life and still not really understand it.
All the controlling factors.
Yes, all the human factors have been taken out as much as possible. In A Course in Miracles, Christ tells us we can only create God's will. So there's this understanding that we create our own destiny, and this understanding is much more in popular culture now, isn't it? With things, people saying you are your thoughts and you create your own world, and we're starting to understand that we're not just sitting back letting life happen to us. We actually are having some influence on all of this. And maybe actually we're creating our life, and hey, I don't like this life, so how do I create a better one? So we're starting to wake up to these ideas that we are creators, co-creators with God, or create through the Godhead within us. Now, it's said that we can only create God's will. Now, this is a very difficult statement to understand, because that means that everything that happens in the world is God's will. And that is very, very difficult when you see the amount of suffering in the world. So that one I'm going to leave for your own intuition. You can take that one in with yourself. But what he says is that when we feel connected, we feel love. So if we look at a more of a divine love, I think we've all had moments of that supreme connection to something that's more than we are. If we look at the love between two people, when we are in love, we feel particularly connected to that person. And we can actually measure that we're actually sending energy from one heart chakra to the other. And when we break up with that person or disconnect, we no longer have that energy from one heart to the other, and that's why we feel so horrible. And we go through a grief process and all of that we know about. But fear and doubt, whenever we feel fear and doubt, this is actually a disconnection from love. And fear and doubt are very, very positive messages to us that we're not seeing something right. We are misperceiving. So whenever you feel fear or doubt, that is your mind and your body's way of saying, here's one of those little things you need to deal with and work through that you can transcend. And you will know, I bet each one of you, we're quite happy with our fears actually, we're quite comfortable. We're not always so comfortable with how magnificent we are, but we're quite happy with our darker side. We often will own up, well, you know, there's this aspect of me I don't like, and that aspect, and I'm scared of this, and I have issue with this, and we are often, I bet if I asked you, you could probably list your 5 biggest fear issues in your life that keep coming up time and time again for you to look at. When we fear, we're not seeing something. Now, our perception comes through our 5 senses. We perceive the world, we all understand the idea that we perceive the world through our own particular glasses. So depending how you were brought up, what conditioning you've had, what society you live in, what gender you are, all affects how you see the world. So when someone acts in a certain way, how I see that action completely depends on what glasses I'm wearing. I could wear the rose-tinted ones and think, oh, that was nice. Or I could wear other ones and think, what did you do that for? You know what I mean? Depends. That's my choice. Their action was the same. So whenever there is fear and doubt, Christ says we're misperceiving. We've got the wrong end of the stick. We're not seeing the truth. Now all of a sudden that puts our fear and doubt and anger back on our shoulders, doesn't it? It's like, no, it's their fault, they're to blame. Sorry, it's yours. And this is why it's such a powerful book and why it changes lives. Meditation, when you go into silence or meditation, it allows you to see the truth. Often when you go into the quiet, if you sit with it for long enough, and you can sit with all the emotion and all the anger and just let it be, you can let it vent, you can rant and rave about it if it helps, but then just go into the quiet and there'll be a little quieter voice somewhere that says, well actually, maybe they didn't mean it that way, maybe you overreacted to that, but do you know what I mean? And you know that truer perception, that truth is there. Intuition is the voice of this truth. Okay, it can be very, very powerful. Once you start listening to your intuition, you will start to see truth more clearly. You will start to see when you are separated from truth. Now that can be a mixed blessing, because ignorance is bliss. Okay, you start to see when you are not congruent. Okay. But when we come to true perception, that oh my God moment, when we see it, the situation for how it truly was, that brings us back to love. And often we feel a union, a connectedness to that person, that situation. We come back to God. And this, in the Course of Miracles, we come to know at-one-ment, atonement. This is forgiveness. When we come back to at-one-ment, we come back to connection and we come back to love. Christ teaches the return to love is through illumination, seeing the truth, which comes from intuition. And forgiveness, which is then an action of the heart. And this is service. When you forgive, you serve, because you serve the all. And this leads to miracles. And when you start to live in this way, and you see how the intuition and the meditation are keys to this, because they help you to see the truth, then you have a choice to act on it or not. And it will change the way that you are, and it will change the way that your world is, because you'll start to create a different reality. And even when challenges come along, you'll see them differently. You'll start to see things, the positive. I said I was going to just briefly, you can see I was getting more and more visual, can't you, as I was doing these. I love this picture. In Taoist belief, this is the yin and the yang. This is the balance, that everything is about bringing the masculine and the feminine together to make the circle whole. That in the yin energy, the darker, the quieter, the deeper, the feminine, the yin energy is when you be, when you just be. So when you meditate, it's to be, it's to go inward, it's to go into the divine feminine, into the yin energy. There's the energy of the moon, it's the energy in water. Okay. The yang energy, the masculine, is the to do, to be out there in the world, doing. It's the energy of the sun. It's much hotter and more, we do too much doing. We don't usually have a problem with doing. But the perfect balance is when you be and you do. And so what meditation does, and listening to your intuition as well, because the moment that you listen to your intuition, in that moment you are in the present. You're not in the past, you're not working things out in the future. When you are going deep into your intuition, there is nothing else in that moment but the present moment. You are at one. It is at one-ment. You are in union or yoga with God. And so in our Western world especially, we have too much of this, too much sunshine, and we get burnt out physically. Depression sometimes can be when there's been too much, and the body says, you need to go inward, I'm going to slow you down. I'm going to
And
stop.
what if there's not enough and that's why you've gone that way?
If you go into here,
Yeah.
you will recharge on a profound, the recharging. If you think of the seasons, and this is how it's nice to think of your life, in the summer, we're full of energy, we're outside, there's lots of light, we tend to be doing more, don't we? We go out
I
more.
need to be doing more.
But wait. So if in the summer we go out there, it's nice and light. If we kept that going and never stopped, like we had endless summers, what will happen to us physically? Burn out. Yeah. And there are certain organs in the body that are yin and yang, and the kidneys will be the one that will burn out. Kidneys. Yeah. You'll have problems with your kidneys because your adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys, and it's to do with the fluid in your body which links to your emotions and whether they are flow. I know this one because I had problems with my kidneys last year, so I'm guilty of this one.
What's that about? Did you just say?
Your kidney energy links to your emotions.
Right.
It's about going with the flow. It's about the flow of the emotions, allowing that energy to flow in the body. It's about the balance of the fluid and the emotions. It's all perfect for where you are and for you coming here today, as always. If we had endless summers, but then we go into autumn, don't we? And in the autumn we start to batten down the hatches, don't we? We rake up the leaves. I know I go through a time of preparing my garden for the winter, and squirrels prepare their food for the winter, and there is a sense of the autumn. It's a time of change, isn't it? It's a transitional season. And many people get ill in the autumn because they don't want to go into winter, they resist it, they want to hang on to that summer energy, so they keep go, and wind up their immune system being compromised, because your immune system is in your energy field. Yeah, and so if we gracefully go into autumn and we accept the change, we accept the leaves falling from the tree, knowing that they will form the soil that nourishes the roots that allows the spring. So we start to accept the cycles of life. We go into winter. Now in the winter, we are often naturally drawn to staying in, to keeping warm. Our energy levels are often lower. We start to eat different type of foods. Yeah, I find in the winter there is a part of me wants to hibernate. Yes. That is you being drawn into the yin energy, going inward. Yeah, it's a very important thing to do. Animals know. Animals sleep through the winter. They're not silly. And what it does is it recharges, it readdresses this yin-yang balance. And what you're doing, it's like the energy that's under the soil nourishing the bulbs. Okay. If those bulbs just flowered all year round and they never pulled back down into under the soil and re-energize, they would eventually stop flowering. And you and I know that if you have a bulb that's nourished with a good winter, you wind up with two. You know what I mean? And so we are the same. If we can resist the urge to keep going, excuse me, all winter, and naturally go inward. I find in winter I meditate more for longer. I'm drawn to it. I want to.
That's a good idea. I should, because I've been trying to resist staying in, you know.
No.
Yeah.
No. If it's intuitive,
Yeah.
if it's not coming from a fear place, if it's coming from, do you know, you know what you need sometimes. I
Yeah.
just need some time and space for me.
Well, that's it. And I've done exactly that. Yeah.
And that is perfect. Because then what happens, when the spring comes and nature naturally starts going yippee with all this wonderful energy, you do the same. And you have a spring in your step and you are revitalized and the energy flows and you start to rebirth all the new things in your life and you have an abundance of energy. So if we understand the yin-yang, this is why in the full moon, when the moon is full, people's emotions are often all over the place. And then come the new moon, they've settled down and they're ready to rebirth. The new moon is like the spring and the full moon is like the winter. In the full moon, go inward, meditate, join with others in meditation in the full moon. So we are part of all of these cycles. So we can look at your intuition as well. If you've had too much energy out in the world for a good part of this life, maybe it's time to go inward now, to bring the balance between being and doing into a better balance. There's a lot. I've been reading my kids Winnie the Pooh lately because I love the language. My twins are 7 at the end of the month, and I've got their old original books, you know, the grotty paperbacks with the drawings. And Winnie the Pooh, if you've ever read the Tao of